All right, so my name is Thiago Ghisi, and today I'm here to talk about career abroad. So it's not going to be a super technical talk. So before I get started, I just want to say that I don't consider anyone to be more or less successful because they work abroad. I really believe that these days doesn't make a difference. If you work from Brazil or in Brazil, you can still evolve a lot and be a super successful professional. Okay, so with that being said, why I want to talk about this. So over the past 3 years, I have interviewed around, or a little bit more than 200 engineers, tech leads, and also managers for the companies that I work for in New York. And recently, last year, I did 120 interviews alone, and I helped to grow our department from 50 to 100 engineers. And that was not only for New York, but also was for our new offices in London and Singapore. And also we hire a lot of remote engineers. So also as an engineering manager, over the past 3 years, I helped 5 of the engineers I work with to be promoted from, let's say, mid-level to senior engineers. So another quick thing, I just want to say that I'm not speaking from my employer. I'm speaking on my own here. So this is only my opinion. This is only what I learned. So it's not the opinion of my company. And don't worry about taking notes. I'll be sharing the link with all the references and everything that I will present at the end. Okay, so next, just a quick shame plug. I'm currently writing a book. It's called Career Abroad, and I'm interviewing Brazilians that live on the top 30 global tech hubs. So the main goal of this project is to help you, someone that is planning to move to work abroad, on how to be strategic about that, on like to know based on the lessons from other Brazilians, what is the best way to go to a particular city? What kind of technology they use there? How is the tech market there? All right, so with that being said, today I'm here to pretty much share the lessons that I wish I knew 10 years ago when I was starting my career in Tubarão, Santa Catarina. And those are the lessons that I learned over the past 10 years and also over the past 5 years living and working in New York. So the very first question that I want to start is, how does a successful career in tech look like? So before I answer that, I just want to go over the agenda for today. So my presentation is pretty much 3 parts, and at the end, the Q&A that I will be answering at the bar during the happy hour. So the first part is going to be about what is my definition of a successful career. So the second part is going to be how to measure your skills and how to compare your contributions to the contributions that you need to be at your next level in your career. And the last one, I'm going to share a few career hacks, or let's say things that have helped me and have helped many of the successful people that I work with, and also the people that I interview for my book so far to progress throughout their career. Okay, so let's get started. So definition of success. So before I go into that, I just want to say that my answer is based on the professions that I interview for my book, and also on all the professions that I work with over the past 12, 15 years. Okay, so to help out to kind of answer this question, I just want to take a look on a few that I consider to be super successful professionals in our industry. So I want to ask the question, what all those people have in common? What does, for example, Martin Fowler has in common with Linus Torvalds? Or what does, let's say, Paulo Carotti, that's a Brazilian that I interviewed for my book, he's an author and he is amazing, successful profession, has in common with José Valim, the creator of many successful frameworks, and I would say that the last one being the language that created a few years ago. So what does all those people have in common? And my answer is not, let's say, they are all authors, they're all speakers, or they all have created successful languages or open source projects. No, but before I answer that, I just want to go and do a quick analysis on a few common patterns, or let's say patterns of resumes or patterns of career trajectories that I have observed over the past couple of years. So the very first example is a classical example, and I want to ask, is this what a successful career in tech look like? So if you look at John, in this case, someone that has 15 years of experience and has, let's say, evolved or changed companies, but he stayed at the same, let's say, role for a while. Is this what a successful career look like? And my answer would be probably no, but it could be a maybe. So it could be a maybe because maybe John was someone that started in a really small company and changed to a little better company, and now is working, I don't know, at Google for the past 10 years. In that case, I would say that is a successful career. But if I look at John, let's say, just by looking at this resume, is, let's say, has 99% of chances that he is not a super successful professional, at least by my definition, that I'm going to go at the end. So let's go another classical example. So someone that, as you can see, started, evolved as a technical person, then changed to be, let's say, a manager, then a director, and then is a VP of engineering. So if I ask the same question, is this what a successful career in tech look like? My answer here would also be likely yes, but it could be a maybe too. It could be that someone that's maybe is not that successful, someone that's just, let's say, barely in the edge. But I would say that this is a lot closer to what a successful career look like. And as a previous boss of mine used to say, the candidate resume metadata doesn't often lie. In the same way that you can look at bad code, like just by, let's say, looking at the shape of it and telling, oh, this is bad code. But you cannot do the same for good code. When you see a shape of a good code, you need to dig in to investigate. You need to, let's say, interview a particular person to know if this is a really successful professional. But anyways, this, you would say, is someone that I would consider to be a successful professional. Okay, so let's go over. So if I look at the career trajectory, someone that has, let's say, get like challenged a little bigger and bigger. So now let's go over the last example. So someone that also started as a software engineer, moved to be, let's say, a consultant, then a tech lead, then a manager, then moved back to be a tech lead, and then a staff engineer, and then the past couple of years is like a senior software engineer. So if I ask the same question, is this what a successful career in tech look like? My answer would be yes, probably yes, likely. Why? Because it's someone that has experienced different things, took different kind of challenge, and was able to recognize that maybe management was not for them, but moved back and was able to grow and evolve even after. So that is a lot closer to my definition of a successful career. Oops. Sorry. Okay, so if I go back, look at the graph, someone that is progressing and getting more and more challenged. So if I ask the question, what all those people have in common? Not only, let's say, the faces that I showed before, but also the last three resumes that I did a quick analysis on. My answer would be they all have, let's say, a big and ever-growing impact and influence of a large number of people, directly or indirectly, throughout their career. So for me, impact is the key here, because it's almost impossible to sustain impact in the long term without having any degree of influence. So keep in mind that when I'm talking about influence, I'm not talking about authority. I'm not talking about someone that has, let's say, forced influence. I'm talking about someone that you want to be guided from, someone that will someone that is, let's say, the person that will that you want to have whenever you have a challenge, whenever you have a problem. And when I'm talking about impact, I'm not only talking about, let's say, impact at like the code base level, or let's say someone that reduced the response time of the website from, let's say, 5 seconds to 2 seconds. I'm talking also about someone that has impacted the business directly or indirectly, let's say by mentoring engineers, by shaping a culture. So the impact might be measured in many ways. So it could be the impact of someone that wrote a book like Martin Fowler, or the impact of someone that has, let's say, hired a lot of engineers and built amazing culture at their companies. So, but then you might still not be happy with my answer, or you might be asking, okay, what about Fabio Kita, for instance? Is not he a successful tech professional? Or what about Mark Zuckerberg? Or what about Bill Gates? Or what about my previous boss that decided to move to the product side and now is a successful VP of product? Or what about my friend that today is a sales executive at a big corporation? So my answer would be, if they have, let's say, ever-growing impact on a large number of people over the last couple of years or over the course of their career, yes, they're all super successful technologists or professionals. And no, that doesn't need to be, let's say, someone that's a successful manager or VP or someone that's a principal engineer. That could be anyone. But for the sake of time, for this presentation, I'm just focusing on the two most common paths for a software engineer. That's either to grow on the technical side, on the IC, on the individual contributor side, or on the management side. So just for the sake of time, I'll be focusing only on those two most common paths for the rest of the presentation. So now, with my definition of success being said, I want to go to the second part, that is the pillars to grow your career, or the pillars that I found after interviewed a lot of people. So, as I said, over the past 10 months, pretty much this year, I have been conducting a lot of interviews with successful Brazilians that live around the world, and I'm learning about their stories, their career trajectories, and today I want to share some of my findings and the patterns that I found that I believe can help you guide through the next steps on your career. Okay, that is a pretty huge list of things, and I could spend probably more time than would take to install all the Windows Server updates since 1999 talking about it. But to make everyone's life easier, I came up with a framework that I believe will help you identify where you are and what you need to do to take your career to the next level. So let's take a look. So, but before I present the framework, I just want to show you guys how I got there. So as they say, don't trust, verify. So you liking it or not, agreeing it or not, one of the most common or one of the most, let's say, important things to understand in terms of career growth is understand how companies usually evaluate you. And it doesn't matter if you are an intern or a VP of engineering. Usually companies have, let's say, frameworks or a way to evaluate you and to tell if you're, let's say, junior, mid-level, or a senior engineer. So so that is not true all the time. It's not true for every single kind of organization, but it's true for most successful companies. So, and that's highly related to what I talked before. The level of impact and influence you are able to bring on what I call the four pillars of a successful career that we're going to take a look really soon. So, but before we actually go there, I want to show the most common ways that companies actually evaluate people. So so I went to a presentation in New York a couple of months ago from this guy, Marco Rogers, and he broke down the way that companies usually evaluate and, let's say, promote people. And he broke down in 3 models. So there is the startup kit, the Snowflake, and the Spreadsheet Matrix. I'm going to go over each one of those and explain a little bit what they are and what kind of companies use them. And then I will tell you my favorite one and how you can use this to guide through your career. So the first one is, I would say, is the most common and is a bad one. because like there are many problems with this, let's say, this model. So it is super vague. You don't have clear definitions of, let's say, what differs like a junior engineer from a senior engineer, or and also like whenever you get to be a senior engineer, what is after that? You pretty much you don't have more room for growth after you get to senior, and that is pretty much. And another problem with this is that you are in the middle forever. So once you're like a mid-level engineer, you just don't know like when you're going to go to the next level because the definitions are not clear. So this is a good model to. This is not a good model to look at and extract anything useful, but it is one of the most common ones. So the second one that it was actually a Medium engineering team that came up with is a really sophisticated one, and it tries to score every single you in every single aspect, and you need to be careful not to move, let's say, and focus too much on the numbers. So it's a pretty good model to identify areas to look at, but in general, it's super overwhelming. So, and then finally, there is the model that I like, and I have been using that is used by my company, the company they work for, and it was popularized by a startup in New York called Rent the Runaway. That's called the Spreadsheet Matrix. The reason why I like this is because it's simple and at the same time really useful to kind of have conversations and to, let's say, to know like what are the areas, what are the responsibilities, what are the behaviors, what differs, let's say, a senior engineer from a non-senior engineer. And it shows you kind of like what are the areas that are most important to the company. So in this case, if you are, let's say, an engineer, in this case, engineer 1, those are the expectations that the company has on you. So, and then as you can see, there are many areas. And then if you want to go to the next level, you need to take your skills on the first area to the next level. But not only that, all the areas that that matter to the company. So you can't evolve only one side. So I would say it's not perfect. It has a few flaws, but is good enough for most cases. And it is the one that I'm going to use for the rest of the presentation, the one that I'm based off and the one that I'm used to work with. So what have I found? So after analyzing many different career promotion models from different companies, and after interviewing many successful professionals, what I found is the 4 pillars of a successful career. So the pillars are platform, product, process, and people. So the most successful profession that I know, they focus on getting better, increasing their impact and influence, not in only one of the P's, that's usually the platform, the code base, but also on the four of them. So those are what I found to be the four pillars of a successful and ever-growing career in tech. And I'm going to go over the details in each one of them. So just to add, the first 2 pillars are the what, and the second 2 pillars are the how. So the very first pillar, the P1, is probably the most famous, and usually what dev thinks to be all that they need to focus on to advance their careers. That is not completely wrong, but there's more to that. So I would say if you only focus on getting better at the platform level, you're going to get stuck at some point in your career. So what is the first P? What is the first pillar of a successful career? So the first pillar is, as I said, the platform, is the technical skills, is the kind of the internal of the product that you work with. It is, let's say, the infrastructure. It is the code base. It is the deployment scripts. It is the CI/CD pipeline you have. It is the language you use, the framework you use, the tools that you use. It's pretty much what only engineers can see and assess. So a few examples of platforms. So if you are, let's say, an iOS engineer, your platform, it could be only iOS or it could be mobile. If you are like a backend engineer, your platform is backend. If you are front-end. So, and there are more examples of platforms, but for the sake of time, I'm just, let's say, giving the examples of those 3. So, so that is a really important pillar, and the action verb here is building. is what you need to do to build successful products. So then the question that we might be asking, okay, that's good. The first pillar is called platform. That's technical skills. But how do I get better at this? Like, what can I do about this? And the obvious advice that you're going to hear is basically that, oh, focus in one language at a time, go all the way in, read all the advanced books, implement like all the kind of different design patterns, get a certification, learn good engineering practices. And that's not bad at all. But what I want to show you guys is the not so obvious chips, the not so obvious things that have helped me. So in the case of the first pillar, platform, one thing that has helped me a lot and influenced a lot my career over the past 10 years has been this article by Scott Ambler that was published in 2006 and is what is called Generalizing Specialists. So this is basically a different way to think about the big blocks that compose your, let's say, skill set. And this is basically about not what most people think when they're progressing throughout their career is to be an expert on a single area. And if you go to the industry and see what is the need that we have nowadays, is actually you don't only need to be let's say a super expert on only one particular thing, but you also need to be able to navigate and understand, and whenever needed, go and work in other areas. So that is what's called the Tshape Professional. So the T-shaped is someone, or T-shaped engineer. T-shaped is someone that is able to not only work really deep on a single platform, but also able to help with, let's say, the pretty good basics of another platform. And the generalizing specialist idea is about not stopping there, like not only, let's say, going broad on the basis, but also having more than one expertise. So this is what I want to call is like, it's not about being a generalizing specialist. It's not about being a jack of all trades and a master of none. It's about being a jack of many trades and a master of some. So, I just want to share a story. So what happened with my career and how this helped me to be a better professional. So when I read this article back in, 2007, 2008, I was a Java engineer. I was working for 5 years and Java was my life. And then after reading this, I start to kind of like question, okay, what else do I need to do? What else is there that I need to improve on to be more successful and to grow? And one of the very first things I remember was that at some point, a couple of months later, I was invited to be a project manager at my company. And I decided, you know what? I already know enough of Java. Maybe it's a good moment to try a different skill set that is also important to be a successful professional and also to deliver products. So I ended up moving to be a project manager, and after 6 months, I was hating it, and I moved back to be an engineer. But then I asked the same question, okay, I could go down this path and being like a super expert in Java, but that doesn't seem to be the right thing. So I moved to be like an expert in testing, and I want to know everything that I could about automated testing. So I built the expertise there, and then I moved to a different company as a QA engineer expert in like testing, automated testing. And then years later, after having this experience in both as a QA, as an engineer, as a project manager, then I was invited to be an engineering manager because I could connect a lot of things that other engineers that were a lot better than I was, but they would not be able to connect the dots because I was able to navigate a lot better in a lot of different aspects. And also, more recently, I was promoted to be a director of engineering, not only because I was, let's say, the best engineering manager, but probably because I was the one that was able to connect a lot of different areas, and I was able to understand the pains that a lot of different people had on their day-to-day. So this is one idea for to get better at the first P. So is to think about your skills more as like building blocks, and like to not, let's say, go really narrow in one of them, but also to take a look in other areas and to see what else can you do, because I believe that for the next few years, that's going to be really important. Is if you focus on a single platform, that platform might die. But if you have, let's say, a broad view and some expertise, it's likely that at least one of your expertise is going to be still around. Okay, so one reference that I want to share on this pillar is a book from one of the Brazilians that I interviewed for my book, Sandro Mancuso. And one thing that Sandro did on his book, The Software Craftsman, was he has a chapter on books, and he has a strategic way about approaching books. So, and he pretty much categorized books in 4 categories, and says there are books that are important for the short term, but they are likely to die in the next few years because they're technology specific, and there are books that are probably the concepts and like the principles behind it are going to probably stay like still kind of true for the rest of your career as an engineer or as a tech professional. So one tip that I want to share here is read a lot of books, but not only that, be super strategic on how you prioritize the books and kind of like balancing out your short or your medium and your long-term plans. Okay, pillar 2. So this is what I call the product delivery pillar. It is, so if the first P is about the technical skills, the second P is about delivery, is about kind of like getting stuff done, is about impacting the user. So is about also to keep your company profitable. So is about how you're perceived externally. Even if internally on the code base, you're not good. You're not, let's say, the code base is really in bad shape, but how you perceive externally. So so if you understand product delivery is about kind of like being a successful engineer or someone that's able to deliver product and on a consistent basis. And if you ask kind of like, okay, that's interesting, but how do I get better at this? How do I get better at shipping more products or delivering more value, right? And the obvious idea here is learn keyboard shortcuts, automate things, create systems for your to-do list, maximize your output, work long hours, get more done, finish things faster, kind of like minimize your interruptions, or learn to estimate and manage projects really well, get a PMP certification. And again, those like classical advices on how to get best at delivery, those are not bad. But I believe there's something there that has helped me a lot and could help you, and that's not so a lot, it's not super obvious. That is about maximize the work not done. So is about kind of usually like one common quote that you're going to hear a lot is that the best code is no code at all. And that is something that I have seen a lot of professionals ignoring pretty much throughout their career. They think that every single problem you have to solve with code. And one idea that I want to bring here is one tool that has helped me a lot. It's called user story mapping. It's still not super popular, but I think is amazing and has helped me to maximize work not to be done for a lot of projects over the last couple of years. So, just a quick story that I want to tell here is that I hate bragging about myself, but in the past 2 projects that I had as an engineering manager, I was able pretty much to kill like 80% of the backlog just by asking the product managers and the engineers to sit together to do user story mapping. And user story mapping is so powerful that and it kind of like, it allows you to see the big picture and allows you to focus on only one small piece. When you only have, let's say, a flat backlog, it doesn't seem that things are going to go to end. It doesn't seem that you're doing anything that's meaningful because you're not able to visualize the journey. You're not able to visualize how, like, what you're going to ship at what moment and what kind of business value it's delivering. So this is something that I want to share. Is a tool that has helped me a lot, as I said. And another reference is also from one of the Brazilians that I interviewed for my book. And by the way, the English version of his book is coming out in a few months. is a Leanception. I worked with Paulo Caroli back at ThoughtWorks a few years ago, and I have learned these techniques about user story mapping and maximizing the work not to be done with him. So this is a fantastic book. I just added a quote in Portuguese here, but that's one tip that I want to give about the pillar 2. Now about the third pillar. So third pillar is about process. Third pillar is about how you are scaling your engineering organization. How dependent are you from single points of failure or from single engineers? Those are, let's say, the things, those are the culture, those are the things that you don't, let's say, you don't have to say. This is pretty much how people work. This is like how people communicate and contribute with each other. So the action verb here is strengthening, right? So this is about the culture, the practice, the guidelines, the recruiting, the community that you have around the engineering organization. So a few examples of things here. Like, for example, it is about how do you interview people? How do you onboard people? What kind of engineering practices are used on the day-to-day? What kind of things are not working process-wise that, let's say, someone is always fixing, but it could be solved by a process change? So, sorry. If you ask the same question, okay, so the first pillar is about getting better at the platform level, technical skills. The second pillar is about getting better at shipping products or delivering. Third pillar is about creating a process or a culture around that's going to allow the organization to scale, or to, let's say, to have a process that is not broken, that's not, let's say, is not causing a lot of rework. So if you ask, okay, how do I get better at this, or how can I make a bigger impact at the process level? So the obvious advice on this is, oh, maybe you should start to organize meetups. Maybe you should visit different companies. Maybe you should learn about other companies' culture and try to implement their cultures on your own company. Or maybe you should go to conference. Maybe you should spend more time mentoring engineers so they follow the good practices and they're not, let's say, skipping tests or doing things in a bad way. And again, this is really good. This is really good advice. But another piece of advice that I want to give you to grow on this particular pillar is to be an interviewer, is to somehow to find a way to participate in your company's recruitment process. And the reason for that is because at the moment that you start interview other engineers or other devs or other technologists, you're going to start to think about, let's say, okay, if I'm interviewing for this position, what kind of skills or what kind of things do I need to take in consideration? How do I assess this? What kind of problems do we have? What kind of professions that we have that are really successful in my company that I want to try to kind of replicate by interviewing someone that's like them? And this is amazing thing to do, and it's gonna allow you to think about things that are a lot broader than, let's say, if you just stay on a project and just stay hands down coding, because this is kind of is probably the first step that you're going to be able to have a system view of the organization. So a reference to this, and that's probably a much better name for this pillar, is peopleware. So this is about your organization, your process is going to be just as good as the people that hire the engineers. So it's basically saying is that if you have bad interviewers, if you have a bad recruitment process, your engineering organization, your company is going to reflect that. So this is a really good book, and it's probably the way, if you want to have an overview of what the third pillar that I'm talking about is the book that I would recommend. So now going to the last pillar of, let's say, a successful career, and that is people. So people and leadership. So this is about kind of the how, is about kind of how do you collaborate across different roles, or how people are, let's say, communicating, how are people giving feedback. These are values, those are things that even when you're not seeing, people are doing. so this is pretty much invisible. And the keyword here is about supporting. So how are the engineers being supported? How is the communication? How is the culture of mentoring? So this is about how you support your group members at difficult times. How you kind of make sure that everybody is psychology safe. Let's say. So and if you ask about, okay, if I go back, what is the thing that I need to do so I get better at leadership, or at the four pillar? And the common advice would be, okay, do leadership trainings, read books about the subject, give presentations, do an MBA maybe, or learn how to communicate effectively, learn how to give feedback. And that, again, is all good. But one tip that I want to share here is also from a presentation from the lead dev New York, from Tanya, and that is about being a glue person. Being a glue person means being someone that is doing whatever is needed so that the project is delivered. Someone that whenever there is a need is going to do that particular thing. If there is a need to schedule a meeting to get people aligned on a particular thing, that's going to be the person that's going to do that. If there is a need to review, let's say, a particular API doc, that is the person that's going to do that. So if you ask how to get better at this, I would say put the effort on trying to find things that are not working. So, and another thing that I would say here is that a lot of times is not about what you read or what you know. It's about what you put effort into every day. So, let's say, for example, that you want to become good at facilitating meetings. What is the best way to do it? Is trying to facilitate as many meetings as possible. You want to get better at giving feedback to other people. So the best way to do it is to give as many feedback to other people as possible. So this is so obvious, but this is how I believe you can get better at leadership. So the way to get better at leadership is trying to lead, try to find things that are not working and fixing them. So a quick reference to this is this famous quote from Kent Beck, famous programmer, that's basically saying that programming begins a lot before coding. It begins with empathy. So, and the reason for that is once you know what pain, what problem the user has, or what problem the company has, it's a lot easier for you as an engineer to propose a solution. So one idea that I have done in my previous company was to, as an engineer, to move to be on the support side, as a customer support for 1 week. And then is incredible how humbling is that experience, because once you know the pain that all the CCP agents or all the people that work on the support go through, is a lot easier for you to design a software that's going to solve their needs. So with that, I finished the part 2, that's the skill set. And I just want to say that if you go back to the 4 pillars, right? So the first one being platform, the second one being process, the third one, platform, product, process, and people. One thing that I want to say is that depending on the level that you are in your career, there are things that are more important for you on the first 2 pillars versus on the last 2 pillars. So, for example, if you're a junior engineer, the most important thing you can do for your career is to have a really solid technical foundation, or pillar 1, right? And also to deliver as much as you can early on and get really good at delivering things and getting stuff done. But on the other hand, if you're as a senior engineer or if you're a director, the most important thing for you to grow in your career is not by focusing on the first 2 pillars, but actually to focus on the last 2 pillars. That is investing your energy to design a process that will scale. Is kind of like making sure that people are happy, make sure that there is no, let's say, thing gets stuck there. There is no conflict between chains. Is probably the way that you're going to be able to kind of grow your impact and to grow your career. So then just to finalize, I want to go over a few career hacks. And the first one starts with my story on this blog post from our friend Akita here. So this is a really old post, and I was able to finally find this last night. But one of the things that Akita was saying here, then I don't know why I got that in the back of my mind for years, was about changing companies every 3 years, like especially during your 20s, like when you're like on your first 10 years of experience. And I was thinking about that and saying, okay, looking at these 4 pillars, how does that relate? Does that make sense? And the conclusion that I got is that actually my rule and the thing that I have kind of used over the past couple of years is being not changing companies every 3 years, but actually changing one of the piece of your career every year or every 2 years. So what I mean by that is, if you're working with a particular, even if you stay on the same job, if you can switch from working with Ruby to, I don't know, Scala after 2 years, is some step you're giving like on the right direction there. And the same applies to all the 4 pillars, right? So you don't actually need to change jobs, even though I believe like changing jobs is a really amazing way to grow. You can focus on the pillars. And of course, sometimes in order to evolve, you're gonna need to switch jobs so you can change many pillars at once and pretty much kind of say, take your career to the next level. So, and one career hack that I want to share here is about continuous interviewing. So it's about not interview only when you need, but be interviewing all the time, even when you're happy at your current job. And whenever you get a proposal, you just see that as a feedback that someone on the market wants to pay your price or wants to hire you, right? Same way that when you have, let's say, a house that's worth $1 million, but only on paper, that doesn't mean anything. But when you have someone writing a check and giving to your hands, then that means that, yes, it seems that you actually are on the right track. The career hack number 2 is the one that I learned from my boss these days. And it is basically about recognizing the moments that you need to focus on learning versus the moments that you need to focus on earning. So it is about, let's say, recognizing that maybe your first 2 or 3 jobs, you're not going to be earning a lot of money. You're not making a lot of money, but you're going to be learning a lot. And then maybe at the time of your 4th job, then what you have to focus on is on the earning. Is about what I know a lot of successful professionals that I interview have done, that sometimes they did one step back because they need to focus more on learning, to then like a couple of years later to focus on earning and to kind of like to get that money that they lost while they're learning. So, and then the final career hack is to think about the short term as well as the long term. One thing that I found is that a lot of professionals, they only focus on the short term. What is the next, let's say, library that I need to learn? What is the next language that I will need to learn to be successful? And they forget about the long term. They forget about kind of like, where do we want to be in, let's say, 5 years from now? And what do I need to do to be there? So I'm almost running out of time. So I just want to say thank you, guys. And that's all I had.